The contract was simple: pretend to be his wife for 1 year, collect my $1 million payout, and walk away. No feelings, no complications. But when his lips touched mine at our fake wedding, something inside me shattered. I never expected to fall for the man who bought my hand in marriage, asterisk. If you're enjoying this story, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more emotional journeys that will keep you on the edge of your seat. The first time I met Alexander Blackwood, I was wearing coffee-stained pants and had exactly $27 in my bank account. "You're fired, Miss Chen," he said, not even looking up from his computer screen. I stood frozen in his massive corner office, clutching the stack of financial reports I'd spent all night preparing. The Manhattan skyline stretched behind him like a kingdom he ruled without question. And in a way, he did. Blackwood Enterprises owned half the real estate in the city, and Alexander Blackwood owned everyone who worked for him. Including me. At least for the next 30 seconds. "I'm sorry, what?" I managed to choke out. He finally looked up, his steel-gray eyes meeting mine with cold indifference. "Your analysis is flawed. The Henderson acquisition would be a disaster. I can't have someone with such poor judgment on my team." My cheeks burned with humiliation and anger. I'd worked 80-hour weeks for 3 years at this company, climbing from intern to financial analyst through sheer determination. And now, because of one report he disagreed with, I was being tossed aside. With all due respect, Mr. Blackwood, if you'd actually read my full analysis, you'd see that I recommended against the Henderson acquisition precisely because their debt structure is unsustainable. Something flickered across his face, surprise, maybe. He reached for the report, flipping through pages with those long, elegant fingers that had graced countless business magazines. "Page 17, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Silence stretched between us as he read. I counted my heartbeats, wondering how I'd pay next month's rent, how I'd explain to my sick mother that I couldn't help with her medical bills anymore. "You're not fired," he finally said, setting down the report. Relief flooded through me, but before I could thank him, he continued. "Instead, I have a proposition for you." That was 6 months ago. Now I stood in a bridal suite at the Plaza Hotel, staring at my reflection in a $50,000 Vera Wang wedding dress, wondering how my life had spiraled so dramatically out of control. The proposition had seemed simple enough: pretend to be Alexander Blackwood's fiancée, then wife, for 1 year. In return, I'd receive $1 million and a glowing recommendation for any job I wanted afterward. The contract was 47 pages long, drafted by the best lawyers in New York, with clauses covering everything from public displays of affection, minimal, choreographed, to living arrangements, separate bedrooms in his penthouse. What the contract didn't cover was what would happen if I started to feel something for the man behind the cold CEO mask. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. 5 minutes, Miss Chen." The wedding planner's voice came through the door. "Thank you," I called back, my voice surprisingly steady considering the hurricane of emotions inside me. I took one last look at myself. Mei Chen, 28, daughter of Chinese immigrants, about to marry one of the richest men in America, for show. My mother thought it was a fairy tale come true. My best friend Zoe thought I was making a deal with the devil. I wasn't sure which of them was right anymore. The wedding march began, and I stepped into the hallway where my father waited, his eyes glistening with tears of pride. He had no idea this was all fake. No one did, except Alexander and me. "You look beautiful, Mei," he whispered, using my childhood nickname. Guilt twisted in my stomach. "Thanks, Dad." As we began our walk down the aisle, 300 of New York's elite turned to watch. I recognized faces from magazines and television, politicians, celebrities, business tycoons. All here to witness Alexander Blackwood finally settling down with the woman who had captured his heart. If only they knew the truth. And then I saw him, standing at the altar in a custom Tom Ford tuxedo, his dark hair perfectly styled, his posture impeccable. For a moment, our eyes locked, and something passed between us, something unscripted, something not covered in our 47-page contract. My steps faltered. "You okay?" my father whispered. No, I wasn't okay. Because in that moment, I realized I was in serious danger of breaking the most important clause in our contract: no falling in love. "You may kiss the bride." The words hung in the air between us. We had practiced this, of course. A chaste, brief press of lips that would satisfy the audience without crossing any lines. But when Alexander's hands gently cupped my face, when his eyes searched mine with an intensity I'd never seen before, the script went out the window. His lips touched mine, soft at first, then with a hunger that sent electricity racing through my body. I forgot about the audience, the contract, the $1 million. I forgot everything except the feeling of being in his arms. When we finally broke apart, the applause was thunderous. I was breathless, disoriented. Alexander's expression gave nothing away, but his hand trembled slightly against mine. "Ladies and gentlemen," the officiant announced, "I present to you Mr. and Mrs. Blackwood." Mrs. Blackwood. The name felt foreign, like clothes that didn't quite fit. Yet as Alexander led me back down the aisle, his hand firm against the small of my back, I couldn't help wondering what it would be like if this were real. The reception was a blur of champagne, congratulations, and carefully rehearsed stories about our whirlwind romance. By midnight, my cheeks hurt from smiling, and all I wanted was to escape the charade for a few moments. I slipped away to a balcony overlooking Central Park, the October air crisp against my skin. The city lights twinkled below, a constellation of human ambition and dreams. "Hiding from your new husband?" I turned to find Alexander leaning against the doorway, two champagne flutes in hand. He'd loosened his tie, and a lock of dark hair had fallen across his forehead, making him look younger, more approachable. "Just needed some air," I said, accepting the champagne he offered. "It's exhausting pretending to be madly in love." Something flickered in his eyes. "You're doing an excellent job." That kiss was convincing. Heat crept up my neck. I was just playing my part. Of course. He turned to look out at the city, his profile sharp against the night sky. "That's what we both agreed to." We stood in silence, the sounds of the reception muffled behind us. I studied him covertly, this man I had agreed to spend a year of my life with. In the 6 months since his proposition, I'd learned surprisingly little about the real Alexander Blackwood. He kept his personal life locked away as securely as his company's trade secrets. Why me? The question slipped out before I could stop it. Out of all the women in New York, why choose your disgraced financial analyst for this arrangement? He took a long sip of champagne before answering. "You stood up to me. Not many people do that." "That's it? You wanted someone who wasn't afraid of you?" "I wanted someone real." His voice was quiet, almost vulnerable. "Someone who sees me as a person, not a bank account or a stepping stone." When you defended your analysis that day, you weren't seeing Alexander Blackwood, CEO. You were just seeing someone who was wrong. I laughed despite myself. Most people don't appreciate being told they're wrong. I'm not most people. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, transforming his face. Besides, your analysis was correct. The Henderson acquisition would have been a disaster. Is that why you kept me on? Because I was right about Henderson? He turned to face me fully, his expression suddenly serious. I kept you on because you're brilliant, Mei. Your financial instincts are exceptional. But I proposed this arrangement because I saw something else in you, integrity. I needed someone I could trust with this situation. The situation being your grandfather's will, I said, filling in the blanks. Alexander had explained it briefly when he first proposed our arrangement. His grandfather's will stipulated that he must be married by his 35th birthday to maintain control of the family company. That birthday was approaching in 13 months. Yes. 1 year of marriage, and then the company is secure. After that, we can quietly divorce, and you'll have your $1 million. And what do you get, besides keeping your company? He looked away. Freedom from my grandfather's antiquated ideas about family and legacy. Freedom from the endless parade of women my mother keeps introducing me to. So I'm the lesser of many evils, I said lightly, trying to ignore the strange disappointment I felt. You're a solution to a problem, he corrected. A mutually beneficial arrangement. A solution. A business transaction. That's all this was supposed to be. So why did his words sting? Well, I raised my glass, here's to mutually beneficial arrangements. He clinked his glass against mine, his eyes never leaving my face. And to convincing performances. As we sipped our champagne under the New York sky, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was stepping into something far more complicated than I'd bargained for. The contract might have covered every legal aspect of our arrangement, but it said nothing about what to do when the lines between pretense and reality began to blur. The penthouse was silent when we returned from our honeymoon in the Maldives, a week of separate bungalows, carefully staged photos for social media, and polite conversations over dinner. If the resort staff thought it strange that the newlyweds never touched, they were paid well enough not to mention it. Your room is this way, Alexander said, leading me down a hallway in his sprawling Central Park penthouse. I had your things moved in while we were away. He opened a door to reveal a suite larger than my entire former apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of the park, and the king-sized bed looked like it belonged in a palace. This is incredible, I breathed, stepping inside. The closet is through there, he continued, all business. I took the liberty of having a stylist select some appropriate clothes for your new position. My new position? As my wife, you'll be expected to attend certain functions, charity events, board dinners. Your wardrobe should reflect that. I walked to the closet and gasped. Rows of designer clothes, shoes, and handbags filled the space, more luxury items than I'd seen outside of department stores. This is too much, I protested. It's necessary, he countered. No one would believe Alexander Blackwood's wife shops at H&M. The casual dismissal of my former life stung. There's nothing wrong with H&M. His expression softened slightly. Of course not. But this is part of the role, Mei. Just like the wedding, just like the honeymoon photos. It's all part of selling the story. I ran my fingers over a silk Chanel dress, the price tag still attached. More than my former monthly salary. What exactly will my days look like? I asked, turning back to him. I can't just sit around this penthouse for a year. You'll continue working at Blackwood Enterprises, he said. I've created a new position for you in our strategic development department. Your financial analysis skills will be put to good use evaluating potential acquisitions and partnerships. I raised an eyebrow. Won't people think it's nepotism? Let them. Your work will speak for itself. He checked his watch. I have calls to make. Dinner is at 7 if you'd like to join me. Mrs. Rivera comes in to cook on weekdays. With that, he was gone, leaving me alone in my gilded cage. I sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly overwhelmed by the reality of what I'd done. For the next year, I would live in this penthouse, work at his company, pretend to be in love with him at public events. And then what? Back to my normal life, but with $1 million in the bank? It had seemed so simple when I signed the contract. Now, nothing felt simple anymore. Weeks passed, and slowly we fell into a routine. Mornings began with coffee in the kitchen, Alexander reading financial news on his tablet, me reviewing my schedule for the day. We rode to work separately most days, maintaining professional distance at the office. Evenings were spent in companionable silence in the penthouse's massive living room, him working on his laptop, me reading or watching movies with headphones. It was like living with a polite roommate, except for the nights when we had to attend events together. Then, Alexander would transform into an attentive husband, his hand never leaving the small of my back, his eyes finding mine across crowded rooms, his smile warm and intimate when introducing me to business associates. "You're quite the actor," I remarked one night as we returned from a charity gala. I kicked off the painful stilettos I'd been wearing for 6 hours, sighing with relief. "I could say the same about you," he replied, loosening his tie. "That story you told about our first date was inspired." I laughed, remembering the elaborate tale I'd spun about Alexander taking me sailing, only for us to get caught in a sudden storm. Well, I had to explain why the great Alexander Blackwood would fall for someone like me. A near-death experience seemed plausible. He frowned, pouring himself a whiskey from the bar cart. "What do you mean, someone like you?" I gestured vaguely at myself, still in the designer gown he'd selected for the evening. "You know what I mean. I'm not exactly from your world. Everyone at that gala tonight was wondering what you see in me." "Is that what you think?" He set down his glass, studying me with an intensity that made me nervous. "That I'm somehow above you? Aren't you? The billionaire CEO with the perfect pedigree, dating the daughter of Chinese immigrants who grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment in Queens?" He crossed the room in 3 long strides, stopping just inches from me. "Do you know what I see when I look at you, Mei?" My heart hammered in my chest. "What?" "I see someone who worked her way through Columbia on scholarships and part-time jobs. Someone who graduated top of her class while helping support her parents. Someone who earned everything she has through intelligence and determination." His voice was low, almost angry. "If anything, you're above me. I was born into privilege. You created your own path." I stared at him, speechless. In the months I'd known him, this was the most personal thing he'd ever said to me. "How do you know all that about me?" I finally managed. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I did my research before proposing our arrangement. I don't enter into contracts lightly. So I was thoroughly vetted." How flattering. It should be. I could have chosen anyone, Mei. I chose you. The air between us felt charged, heavy with unspoken things. He was close enough that I could smell his cologne, see the faint shadow of stubble on his jaw. For one wild moment, I thought he might kiss me, really kiss me, not for show. Instead, he stepped back, the moment breaking like a soap bubble. "It's late," he said, his CEO mask sliding back into place. "We both have early meetings tomorrow." I nodded, gathering my dignity along with my discarded shoes. "Good night, Alexander." As I walked to my room, I could feel his eyes on me, following my retreat. Something was changing between us, something neither of us had anticipated when we signed that contract. And I wasn't sure if I should embrace it or run from it as fast as I could. The first crack in our carefully constructed facade came 3 months into our marriage. I was working late at the office, analyzing a potential acquisition target in the tech sector. The numbers weren't adding up, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was being hidden in the company's financial statements. "You're still here." I looked up to find Alexander standing in my office doorway, his suit jacket slung over one shoulder, tie loosened. He looked tired, the kind of bone-deep exhaustion that even his usual perfect posture couldn't hide. "Just finishing up the Nexus tech analysis," I said, gesturing to the spreadsheets covering my desk. "Something feels off about their reported R&D expenses." He came into my office, closing the door behind him. "Show me." For the next hour, we huddled over the numbers together, our heads bent close, the rest of the office dark and quiet around us. There was something intimate about working side by side like this, away from the pretense of our public relationship. "There," I finally said, pointing to a series of transactions. "They're burying failed research costs in their subsidiary holdings, making their main balance sheet look healthier than it is." Alexander studied the evidence I'd compiled, a slow,